Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. Today's topic: meet the ice-dependent seals of Antarctica, presented by NatHab Expedition Leader Lianne Thompson. I'm your host, Rob Mess. Thank you so much for joining us here today. Lianne, take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Rob. And thank you, everyone, for joining today. Super excited to talk more about seals. I've done part one of a webinar on seals of Antarctica. I think it was in April. If you go on NatHab's website and kind of look at the Antarctic trip and some of the videos, it'll be on there. So in that one, we kind of covered what makes a seal, and then we talked about two of the other species that are less reliant upon ice. So today we're going to kind of focus on our ice-dependent seals in Antarctica. Very cute, very lovely, very wonderful things to hang out with. But before we get started with that, I'll just quickly introduce myself. My name's Lianne. I live in BC right now. I've been working with NatHab since 2018, do a variety of the adventures that they offer, lots of great itineraries, do a lot of the photo guiding as well. So included in our webinar today will also be a lot of photography tips. So kind of interwoven them throughout the entirety of the itinerary or of the webinar. So yeah, we'll kind of have them pop up here and there, and we'll see where we go with that. But yeah, get to travel a lot and see some incredible places, but Antarctica is certainly just a magical, magical place. So we'll dive in. And the first slides will look a little strange because I just told you we're going to do a webinar on the ice-dependent seals of Antarctica, but we are going to start by just specifically talking about the sea ice, the everyday influence of Antarctic sea ice specifically. So you might not know this, but your daily lives are linked to the Antarctic sea ice. So for me, when I think a lot about photography, I think about trying to capture an entire story. And so sure, we're going to talk about seals and we'll talk about their biology and some behaviors and whatnot. But truly, they're so closely linked to the sea ice. And for us, I find that photography is so much easier to storytell through when it relates to us specifically. So I'm going to do my best to relate it to you as well. And so the first photo tip you'll see in the corner there is to tell the story of the sea ice. And by that, I just simply mean take pictures of the ice itself, because yeah, the animals are incredible, and I'm sure that you anticipate that if you've been down to Antarctica or if you plan to go down there, which you should, the sea ice and the landscape is so stunning as well. So make sure you capture a lot of that. But I just think that the sea ice in general is got such an interesting story to tell. So we're going to start with just talking about the sea ice. We don't think about the Antarctic sea ice on a daily basis. Most people probably don't. But as I said, it is really connected to you. And so I kind of want to go through a few ways that the Antarctic sea ice is so crucial. And so the first one is very simple and does not necessarily relate directly for you, but the fact that it is a platform for animals. So obviously we've got seals, we'll have penguins, we've got all these different animals and ecosystem, the whole ecosystem that is so reliant on this sea ice. So it's a really important resting area, areas for birthing and rearing of young, seals needing to haul out so they can go through their molting period. So lots of really important activities are occurring on the sea ice. Another photo tip here is showing scale. So instead of zooming right in on these seals hanging out on that sea ice, it took a much bigger step back, and it's able to kind of capture more of the environment. So resist the urge to always zoom in, use those wide angle shots to show these kind of smaller looking seals on just this huge chunk of ice, and it can really emphasize more about what it's like to be in Antarctica. So one of the ways that Antarctic sea ice is super important is a platform for animals. The next few slides will talk about the next portion, which is the fact that obviously this Antarctic sea ice plays a critical role in the Antarctic ecosystem. The first way we'll talk about is algae. When sea ice is forming, it is obviously forming from the salty water, but the salt itself actually doesn't stay within the ice. We end up with these brine channels and these brine pockets as they push the salt out of the freezing ice. And these brine pockets embedded within the ice actually help to provide shelter for an abundance of ice algae. So this is a super, super important thing. And as the seasonal melting happens of our Antarctic sea ice, it releases a whole lot of nutrients, releases fresh water, of course, and then nutrients into the ocean, and really creates an ideal situation for these phytoplankton blooms. I could probably do an entire webinar just on this whole section itself, so we're trying to get through it relatively quickly, but hopefully you'll be able to kind of follow along with some of the concepts. But these phytoplankton blooms are really intense, especially along the kind of margins of the sea ice. There's lots of sea ice, or there's a lot of sunlight, obviously, in Antarctica in the summertime. And then because we have the melting sea ice releasing all of these nutrients, it really just creates the perfect environment for the phytoplankton blooms. And so the background picture is like a microscopic picture of phytoplankton, so it does look very unique. Maybe you've seen this photo before. I think every guide on planet Earth uses this photo of phytoplankton because it's just so cool. And then the one in the bottom right-hand corner is showing one of these phytoplankton blooms. So you could, take aerial footage and look down into the ocean in certain spots, and this is what you'd be able to see. And so both the sea ice and the phytoplankton are playing a critical role in our krill ecosystem. And I once read an article that was titled like Antarctic krill, the most important species that you'll never see in Antarctica, which you can see them in Antarctica, but very rarely. No one's going down really to look at the krill, but they are the complete foundation of the entire Antarctic ecosystem. So in the wintertime, they are feeding on that ice algae. They've got specialized little limbs to help them graze along the ice algae. And then in the summertime, they'll really be capitalizing on those phytoplankton blooms. So there is just a massive amount of krill. And when we look at the next slide, it can show you that the krill is essentially the center point of the entire food web of Antarctica, from the seabirds to the whales to the fish, to the squids to the seals, penguins, everything is essentially reliant on that krill. So hopefully you've then connected the importance of the sea ice in feeding the krill, and then the krill being the thing that's feeding the entire ecosystem. It's estimated that Antarctic krill biomass is between 300 and 500 million tons. So it's actually one of the largest animal spread, like in terms of biomass, the largest amount of animal on Earth. So there's an absolutely enormous amount of krill down in Antarctica, enough to support this entire ecosystem. So sea ice, important for a platform for animals, but also important for supporting the entirety of the food web. Now again, maybe both of those two things don't relate directly to you. Krill will relate more to you just in the products that are being generated and created for our consumption or our use, but maybe not as directly related. The next one we talk about, and the way that Antarctic sea ice, this one's really easy to relate to you, is this idea of the ocean conveyor belts. So there's this whole system of currents that move throughout our Earth, and they move heat, they move nutrients, they're moving gases, they're moving everything around the world, and they play a crucial role in regulating Earth's climate by distributing the warm and cold waters between the poles and the tropics. So super, super important. And as sea ice forms, as I said, it pushes the salt out, and this cold, salty water is actually more dense than the warmer fresh water. And so that cold, salty water actually sinks down, and the sinking of that cold, salty water actually, or that happens at the poles, because obviously something similar is happening up in the north. But this cold, salty water sinking down actually pulls water from the tropics. This water flow then helps to bring nutrients to the surface, helps to support the plankton growth. But if we have too much sea ice that's melting, it releases a large amount of fresh water into the ocean. And releasing fresh water obviously is going to impact on the salinity of the water around it. And so it will make the water less dense, prevent it from sinking. And then if we lack this sinking behavior of the water, it can stop or slow down or disrupt this ocean conveyor belt. And if you don't think that this connects to you, I can guarantee you that it does, because this ocean conveyor belt influences all of our global weather systems. So if As we see changes in the Antarctic sea ice, and if we see more and more and more loss of it, what the future of these ocean conveyor belts are, we don't really know. But we do know that it already does and will continue to affect global climate patterns where you live and kind of throughout the entire Earth. So Antarctic sea ice, if you didn't know, is actually super important for your daily life. And the last way that we'll talk about the importance of sea ice is something called the albedo effect. This might be something that you're already familiar with, maybe not the terminology, but if you go outside on a hot day and you can step on the white cement sidewalk or you can step on your black paved driveway, which one is going to be a lot hotter? The black paved driveway, right? So all of that dark is able to absorb so much more sunlight and so much more heat versus the reflective power of a much lighter surface. So if we relate this back to the ocean and to sea ice, when we have snow and ice covered water, it actually reflects about 90% of that heat back up into the atmosphere, versus if we have an open water, then it's able to absorb about 94% of that heat. And so what this does is actually puts us into this positive feedback loop where we have the melting of sea ice creating more open water. Now we've got more open water to absorb more heat, which melts more sea ice, which then creates more open water, absorb more heat, and melts more sea ice. So it is something that we're seeing the ripple effect and this positive feedback system as it continues to kind of get worse and worse throughout our ecosystems. Again, we could probably talk about that in extensive detail, but we are here to talk about seals, so we will jump into them almost next. The last one I want to show you is just how important the sea ice is. You might not have a frame of reference as to how much sea ice is formed around Antarctica. This might be a little bit of a strange map view for you to see of Antarctica because we're used to our view of the map, but if you were to look just directly at the bottom of our southern pole, this is what Antarctica looks like. And we can see the extent of summer sea ice and then winter sea ice. And the formation of the sea ice in the winter essentially doubles the size of Antarctica each year. So it is playing this really critical role in the animals that live there, but you at home as well. So care about our Antarctic sea ice. It's really, really important. But now we will actually dive into our seals. As I said before, I did a previous webinar, and in that webinar, we talked about elephant seals and fur seals. Today, we're going to focus more on our ice-reliant species, which is our leopard seal, our crabeater seal, and our Weddell seal. You'll see there's this other one, the Ross seal that's on there. Very, very seldomly seen on Antarctic journeys, depending on where you're going. I have not seen one being down in Antarctica. And so I just wanted to relate it to kind of the more common species, the other 5 species. Obviously, nothing's a guarantee, but you have a really good chance of seeing the other 5 species if you head down to Antarctica. So if you want to learn more about the Antarctic fur seal or the elephant seal, look back for the other one, and today we'll cover the rest, or the other 3. So we'll start with the leopard seal. So the apex predators of the Antarctic. A really cute and adorable seal despite its kind of ferocious nature, the apex predator. They have this, I've heard it described as this large reptilian head. Maybe you noticed on the very first kind of cover slide of the webinar, but the ends of their mouths are actually turned upwards. So it basically looks like they're permanently smiling. The majority live south of this Antarctic convergence, which is just kind of part of to do with the currents and where the cold water sits, but you can kind of see roughly where our leopard seals are all living, but hanging out down in Antarctica. I like to throw up statistics so people can kind of have a look at how much they weigh. The females do tend to be larger, and this can be true in a lot of species, this sexual dimorphism of having males versus females being larger for our leopard seals, the females, and it gives them an advantage just to hunt larger prey, defend territories effectively. They are the 3rd largest seal in the world, so lots of fun to see. when we look, ooh, did I have a photo tip on that one? No, I did not. When we look at diving and locomotion, leopard seals, they're really powerful swimmers. They can dive up to 300 meters. They can stay submerged for a good amount of time, but they don't typically stay under for that long, and that's based on the food that they're trying to eat, which we'll get into, but I do want to first talk about the photo tip that I've got here, which is using the ice to kind of frame your subject. You can do this in so many different ways, but whenever I'm trying to take photos, you know, I have looked back on my leopard seal photos and I go, oh, wow, they all just look like the same leopard seal, because you need to figure out how to kind of get a little bit creative. If you have a leopard seal laying on ice, yeah, they do look different. You can see very obvious differences between some of them. However, it can still just look very repetitive, the same seal kind of over and over and over again. So I'll look for some of these cool ice features to add to it and potentially look at framing the subject. We could look for melt holes or overhangs. There's ridges and cracks in the sea ice that can often surround the seal. Helps to give like a level of depth as well into the photo too. So we can anchor our seal and its life living on the ice by making sure that we're including that ice into the photo. So, but going back to the hunting, leopard seals, they are, as I said, a top predator in Antarctica. You've maybe seen some really cool videos of them. They're well known because what sets them apart from other seals is their hunting of large vertebrates. So they eat things like seals and sea lions. They're essentially the only type of seal that's feeding on warm-blooded prey. But probably the most commonly known one that people will think of when they think of a leopard seal hunting is the penguins. They are known for hunting penguins. So when we're down there, we're looking along the kind of edges of some of these penguin colonies, because the leopard seals like to hang out in the water and wait for those penguin juveniles to maybe take their first ever jump into the water. They're learning life. They're trying to figure everything out. And then you have this ferocious little leopard seal sitting here waiting to capitalize on that. They are known for catching these penguins. And I know that there's some famous videos out there, especially there's divers. Paul Nicholin was in the water once, and there was this female leopard seal had a penguin and kept bringing it over to him and bringing it over to him and bringing it over to him. And though we don't fully understand all of the behavior, some of the speculation is that a female leopard seal will be teaching her young how to hunt. And part of the way that they can do this is I'll catch a penguin, but then I'll release it and expect the young to then be able to catch it, and that's how they can learn to hunt. So the penguin will still be alive potentially during a portion of this, but it's this teaching and this practicing. So you can watch this video of Paul Nicholin, and he's like, I'm not sure if she thought that I was supposed to catch it and she was trying to teach me how to hunt, but eventually she killed the penguin and then gave it to him, and then was maybe trying to skin it as well, and like, oh man, why is this thing so stupid? Why can't it figure out how to hunt this penguin? It's a really fascinating video to watch, but we don't fully understand what it's doing. That said, we can see the teeth that are here. Their teeth are not going to be the same as some of our other kind of top predators. They don't have the ability to like hold on to something and like grasp and pull away as they're eating. So instead, some of our leopard seals have gotten really good at skinning the penguins with one foul swoop. If they're really good, they can grab hold of one part and then they fling it, they chuck it across, obviously being out. So they'd be on the surface, chuck it across and try to just get the entire skin of the penguin off in one go. Sorry, maybe I should have given a little bit of a warning for that. It's quite fascinating though. They've gotten really, really good at catching those penguins. However, despite the fact they're known for catching penguins, they're known for catching seals, about 60% of the diet of a leopard seal, I'm sure you could find other numbers out there too, is krill. So it goes back to the essentials of that krill as the backbone of the entire ecosystem. So yeah, really cool, really fun encounters to watch. They are known for sometimes coming up near zodiacs, and I've never been in a zodiac when it happened, but I know people that they're zodiacs. They've had the leopard seals approach, and they've got that penguin, and they're showing it off to guests. So certainly keep an eye out for them. The photo tip that I have here is one that says support science. And in the bottom right-hand corner, you see something that's called Happy Whale. And Happy Whale might be a program that you're familiar with. I know it's been talked about in many webinars, but if you've gone out specifically or especially humpback whale on whale watching tours, when they dive, they do that like dorsal tail fluke, and you can take a picture of that of their tail fluke, sorry, and upload it to Happy Whale. It can analyze it and it can tell you and ID an individual whale based on its tail. How does that relate to our seals? They are working on the technology for doing this. And so you can actually take photos of leopard seals, and crab eaters are really popular in there, to upload them to Happy Whale. So even though it's called Happy Whale, they also analyze seals to try and identify more individuals. For our leopard seal here, you can see a bunch of spot patterns on it, so the spot patterns can be unique. We would also be looking at things like scarring as a potential, any unique markings that can help identify individuals, and all of that kind of contributes to our understanding of leopard seal movements and where they're spending time and what they're doing and what they're getting up to. So photo tips is go through your selection, see what's what, and see if there is the opportunity for you to support science when you're taking your photos as well. So something to keep in mind. But yeah, our leopard seals, super cool with their hunting tactics. They, as I said, they'll hang out along the shorelines waiting for penguin colonies. They'll do aquatic stalking. One, I've never seen it, but I've seen videos of it. They'll call it kind of open hunting, but these leopard seals will actually haul out on land in a penguin colony and just like fling themselves around trying to catch. I don't understand how this is quite a successful tactic. You'd think that it would not be successful. The penguins could merely just like take a couple steps away, but it must work at some point because it still persists as a hunting tactic. So who knows what's going on, but they will be somewhat brutal sometimes in their hunting. They do live a pretty solitary life. They're hunting alone. You never really see them hanging out in groups. I have approached like a floating piece of ice and had two seals hanging out on there. It's not likely that they're besties or a mating pair or anything like that. There's enough area for them to be spaced out. They can be quite territorial. So if you see two hauled out on a piece of ice, and sometimes fairly close, from what I've been able to gather, they're just both there. They don't do it on purpose. They're just hanging out. But there's also so much that we don't know about seals in Antarctica. I've been doing polar bear tours for many years, and the amount that we know about bears is so enormous in comparison to what we know about our Antarctic seals. So my brain goes like, well, why this? Or how come this? Or what's this? What's that? And so many times the answer was, we don't know yet. So it's really cool that there's still so much we don't know. But they do live a pretty solitary life, apart from when it comes to mating, which we'll get into next. But the next photo tip that I want to include here is looking for color. And so this color, I imagine that you can guess, does have to do with color of the ice. If you've been around ice and glaciers or anything in the past, icebergs, you'll see that they are not just white. We think about ice, we think about snow, and they think about it just being white. But there's a lot of different colors of blues and turquoises. Depending on the time of day that you're out, it can also look a little bit more warm in its color, depending on what the sun is up to. But these different colors can kind of shift the mood of an image, and especially if we've got like snowfall happening in this one, it can give you an idea of what was happening in that day. Like I look at this photo, and yes, I took it, but I can look here, and because it's got these kind of colder blues, it does give you this little like icy, colder, especially with the snow, all of those things. It can kind of give you a feel of what it was like the day of and taking that photo. So look for color in your photos is definitely a good recommendation too. I was so shocked when I went down to Antarctica. I've been around ice in Canada where I live, and in Greenland and in Iceland. And though that ice is so spectacularly beautiful, I thought, well, how can Antarctica be that much more different? And I was quite shocked at how different it was, and actually how colorful it was, how blue the ice was down there. So capturing that, I think, really does help tell the story of the ice down there too. But we'll get back into seals. Mating and delayed implantation. So when our seals are mating, so mating time does happen in the summer, which is the winter if you're a person living in North America. So it's happening in the summer, but so is pupping as well. So there's a lot of kind of almost overlap with the breeding, the gestation, the pupping, the parental care that's happening between many of our seal species. And we also don't fully know, as I said, a lot about what their gestation period and what their breeding is like. There's only been one breeding like actually seen, and it was in a zoo, so it doesn't count very much. We've never seen breeding of leopard seals in the wild, so we don't really know much about it. It's suspected that they do it underwater. That's where it was seen when it was in captivity. But they'll be using a lot of these different unique vocalizations, and there can be regional variances, almost like these accents in their calls, but they're very, very vocal during mating season, attracting those mates. Mating can occur between November to February, so that's a really big, big difference. And the peak is kind of November and December. And the reason why it happens here, it's when the seals are the most concentrated. There is less sea ice available than in other times of the year. So if there's more sea ice, then our leopard seals can just be they can be farther apart. So having a smaller amount of area means that that they're just going to end up being closer to each other by nature. So they've got this gestation period that says it's 8 to 11 months. I've got the asterisk that's there, and that just has to do with the delayed implantation, which means when mating happens, so sperm meets egg, a little set of cells, this blastocyst develops, but then nothing happens. It's like this it's delayed implantation. There's no development. There's no anything that's actually happening during that time. And it's not for a couple of months later until the blastocyst implants and then the development actually begins. And again, we know this if you've heard this conversation and if you've been on like a bear trip ever, we would have talked a lot about this delayed implantation because it's something that bears use as well. But with seals, we don't fully know because their mating can happen between November and February, and then birthing happening during like at certain times. It's all kind of synchronized-ish, but different studies have found different things. And there are some researchers that actually argue that the seals don't have delayed implantation, but it is generally agreed upon. So we know nothing is essentially what that slide I think is supposed to be saying. For a photo tip here, we would be looking on capturing behavior. They're hanging out on ice floes. They're looking around. They might be doing yawning or stretching or anything like that. So I'd be trying to like capture any of those behaviors. Just again, it kind of builds a personality, and it helps us get to know the subject a little bit more through our image. So I always look to see if there's any behaviors going on. Almost through with our leopard seals, but birth and parental care. So they will often give birth on these little ice floes. A female will nurse her pup from anywhere. And again, look at this variance between 10 days to 8 weeks of nursing, which is just wild. The females are pretty much fasting during this time of year when they are nursing. So they're losing a whole lot of their body weight. And then, shortly after the nursing period is over, once the pups are weaned, is when the male would come in and the males and the female would breed. So almost right away during that time frame. So it's kind of a crazy system. Population estimates, because we don't know a lot about them, because they're solitary, because they're difficult to study and they live in a difficult environment. We don't really know exactly how many of these leopard seals there are. I've read estimates anywhere between 220,000 up to 440,000. So that's a big variance, but there's quite a few of them. Orcas are kind of their own, only known like recognized predators. That said, climate change impacts, they can obviously impact them. If we're having less sea ice, as the ice melts, there's less space for the leopard seals to give birth and to rest and to molt and do everything that they need to do. So we're starting to be able to study them more and more, and hopefully we'll learn more about them. Last photo tip in terms of our leopard seals, and obviously these ones are related to other seals. I was just trying to match a photo tip to a photo that I've got, is to look for reflections. This will be dependent largely on the type of weather you've got there, and the weather in Antarctica is quite variable. So we'll look at if we've got some nice calm flat water, you can find some reflections. This one's kind of only just got it, but I kind of like that it's just slightly peeking in there, but it's really cool. This photo, you can really see that leopard seal smile too, if you hadn't noticed it on another one. I think they're adorable, but they do also look a little bit creepy. So anyways, that's it for leopard seals. We'll move on to another one here, and we'll do the Weddell seals. This is probably the seal that I've actually seen the least down in Antarctica. And even though I've called them an ice reliant species, which they are, they definitely rely on fast ice. I saw more of them hauled out on land than I did the leopards and the crabeater seals that we're talking about today. So I do have a bunch of photos of these guys on land. Their color can match quite well into all of the rocks, which is where this one is hanging out and sleeping. This one, yeah, we can look at the size difference between them as well. So the females, slightly larger than the males. They've got all this blubber and these thick fur and everything to help keep them warm and sustain them throughout the winter month. The aliens of Antarctica, we will come back to that. I really hope my sound plays, but that is up there on purpose. So we've got a slide and a couple of them. We'll see why they're called the aliens of Antarctica. But the photo tip that I've got for this one is just to focus on the eye. This is probably something that you're all very familiar with as photographers, that in general, when we're taking photos of wildlife, you want to focus on the eye. Many of your cameras probably also have eye tracking. Some of them can get very specific as to what type of animal that you are focusing on, but focus on the eye will help with your photography quite a bit. The next one is looking for some of these unique features. So this is again a Weddell seal, but it can be really hard to tell the difference between some of our seal species. And so I'd look for things like spot patterns, and perhaps this one looks a little bit like a leopard seal, but then, you know, we can look at the mouth and it has less of a reptilian head. And when we compare a Weddell seal, and it's smaller than a leopard seal, if we compare a Weddell seal to a crabeater seal, the crabeaters tend to be a little bit more uniform in color and don't really have all these spot patterns. So yeah, try and find some of the features that make them unique and see if you can capitalize your photography on capturing some of that. But they are specifically looking for this fast ice. And so fast ice is sea ice that is still attached to land. And these guys kind of use the ice more than many other species. And that's because they use cracks and they create and maintain breathing holes so that they can, that's actually, we'll talk about on the next one as well. They maintain these breathing holes because they'll do some of these really big deep dives. So they can dive down to 600 meters. They can stay underwater for over an hour, and they do maintain these breathing holes. So they will actually use their front teeth to keep an ice hole open, and that does eventually impact the integrity of their teeth. So they can eventually wear their teeth down so much that it leads to an inability to even maintain the breathing holes and potentially even impact on their ability to find food. These guys, they will be eating fish. They are pretty skilled hunters. They can, yeah, hang out underwater for quite a long time. This is the one where we hope that it plays here, but then when we are talking about their being underwater, mating underwater, how they're going to connect and hang out with each other, it is through these ultrasonic vocalizations. So let's hope it works here. Hopefully you guys can hear that. I hear it. So some really cool vocalizations, which is why I'll kind of like nickname, people will call them a bit more of like an alien sound. And they'll use these vocalizations as territorial displays for breeding, for communication. And I've never been lucky enough to witness it. I might need to stop that. Super cool noises though, but look for it. I've never witnessed it, but I have been told that if two Weddell seals are sleeping next to each other, they might actually start making these noises in their sleep, which I just think would potentially be the cutest thing imaginable, is trying to listen to these Weddell seals talk in their sleep. Pretty adorable. During breeding season, the adult males vocalize a lot. They are needing to advertise their breeding fitness. The sounds can travel really far distances underwater. That's where they'll be using those communications. And it's really important because they spend so much time underwater. This area can be almost near darkness or near total darkness. And so it's important to have those vocalizations to help find each other and for breeding purposes. So anyways, oh, get on eye level. Again, this one's kind of hauled out on land. There are restrictions based on IATO regulations, which is kind of the governing body down in Antarctica that's helping to maintain the health and the health of the animals and the integrity of the ecosystem. So we always have to make sure we're following those guidelines. Unfortunately, as a photographer, you can no longer like sit down and lay down on the ground in Antarctica. Things like the avian bird flu have made some of that a little bit more difficult. And so, yeah, taking some steps back and trying to get down on like maybe a different part of land where you're lower down and can help getting on this eye level. But photographing from both a Zodiac, or on land, we usually try for this perspective because it kind of builds like, yeah, it puts everyone on the same level. And so having that on the eye contact or on the eye level really helps to signify that everyone's on the same level, versus if you're taking a picture above something, it can look very dominant. So it's just kind of changing the perspective on that. But getting on eye level is something that's really helpful. The sounds try to kick in again there. Weddell seals. This is not my photo. I have not seen a Weddell seal pup, but perhaps the cutest pups ever. These big giant eyes. So they'll be a single pup born sometime between September and November. They will also spend about 6 weeks feeding from their mother, 50% fat milk, so really, really high fatty milk, learning to swim and dive, and doing all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, mother is highly, highly invested. And the Weddell seals are actually the most southern breeding mammal in the world. Breeding season kind of more between October and November. And for them, the breeding season actually happens oftentimes while females are still nursing. So the mother will leave her pup temporarily during these short kind of foraging dives, also mating dives, but the pups are still dependent on mom at this time. So mating happens underwater. Again, we don't know a lot about it, but yeah, it's important that this breeding during lactation for the Weddell seals allows them to complete these really essential things in their reproductive cycle at a time that is before the sea ice begins to break up, because their one's quite early in the summer, which would make the pupping and nursing kind of more dangerous. So specifically planned. Again, it's suspected that these ones also have this delayed implantation of a couple of months that help to make sure that we're timing our birthing events always at the same or at the appropriate time. So yeah. When we look at the future of Weddell seals, they are not a seal that was like heavily hunted. None of these 3 seals that we're talking about today were ones that were heavily hunted during the sealing era. That was more our elephant seals and Antarctic fur seals. So when we talk about their future, the climate change impacts that can happen on them, obviously loss of sea ice, they depend on the sea ice for pupping. And so it also, again, as we know from the beginning of the webinar, the sea ice impacts on the fish abundance and whatnot that's there. So any changes to the sea ice will directly impact the future of the Weddell seals. Populations for them are estimated again around 200,000, but you could Google a different source and it will probably tell you something else. So we don't know a whole lot about them. Our last seal that we're going to talk about today is the crabeater seal. So we'll get into them. So first I'll start right off with the photo tip. Using ice to frame your subject. Oh, we actually already talked about this one. Never mind, we've done this one. I had it twice. But you can, yeah, continue to use that ice, look for textures and whatnot, but using the ice definitely helps with that. Their weights and stuff are listed on there. And the thing that I find the most ironic about our crab eater seals is, what do you think that they eat? It's written in their name. They're crab eater seals. And yet that is incorrect. They are krill specialists. And so when we look at the next one, I've got kind of this skull here, and their teeth actually look fairly similar to the leopard seal teeth. But when their jaws are closed, their teeth are there, they are almost acting a little bit like filter feeders. So despite them being called crab eaters, 90% of their diet is Antarctic krill, and they will use this teeth. They get a gulp of water, hopefully filled with krill. They push the water outside of the mouth, and because of their teeth kind of acting like a sieve, the krill stays within their mouth, and then they're able to eat it. Now, this might sound familiar. Again, if you've gone whale watching, if you've gone out looking for things like humpback whales or minke whales, they are baleen whales. So it's the same principle, big gulp of water. And for the whales, they have this baleen. For our seals, they've got this teeth, and it can help kind of sieve the water out. But they can consume millions of krill per day. Krill, teeny tiny little things, so they're eating an absolute abundance of it. So pretty good divers. They can dive pretty deep. 430 meters I've gotten written down here. They don't typically dive that deep because it depends on where the food is, right? We've got some of these records of how far and how long and how deep, how long they can hold their breath for, and how deep they go for many of these seals, but the statistics only tell part of it. Yes, they can do it, but oftentimes they're not diving that deep. Typically, they can be more like 30 meters deep that they're diving. But they'll go out and they'll hunt for hours and hours and hours every single day. Sometimes they'll focus more if they're feeding at night and resting during the day, and all of it has to do with the light and where the phytoplankton and the krill therefore are in the water column. So everything kind of moves. Photo tip here, using some negative space. So in some of the other ones, we've had ice features and, zoom right up and lots of pops of color. And obviously we've got two colors here, but there's not really a lot being conveyed in the background. So we view it more as a bit of negative space. And it helps to kind of, for this one, the mood of it being a little bit more like it's just got some stillness. When I looked at the other one we talked about with like the snowfall and everything, for me, I feel like I can almost hear a bit of an Antarctic storm brewing, potentially some strong winds and this snowfall and the dampness that you would be experiencing and whatnot, versus this one. We don't have all of those elements. So if we've just got lots of kind of empty snow or sky, it's almost more of it like a still silence, cold, like remoteness kind of vibe that I think it can bring out on that. So using some negative space. Now, our crab eater seals, they have a preference for pack ice. So with the Weddell seals, we talked about fast ice. Fast ice is ice that still is attached to land in some capacity. Pack ice is not attached, and therefore it's mobile. It's actually moving around in and of itself. So yeah, they'll hop on these areas of pack ice. They can cover a whole lot of ground. Some of it is just from passive movements of drifting ice flows. Some of it's more active movements of them swimming around, but they do move around and cover a lot of area. They are actually the most abundant seal in the Southern Ocean. And yeah, one of the things, again, that I find quite ironic are crab eater seals. We most commonly see them in high abundance in the Weddell Sea. The Weddell Sea and the Weddell seals are both named after a British explorer and seal hunter, James Weddell. But the Weddell seals don't necessarily hang out more in the Weddell Sea. Hopefully that all makes sense. We actually see a lot more of our crab eaters in the Weddell Sea, and a lot of it has to do with this Weddell gyre. So it's just this clockwise rotating ocean current, and it helps to maintain like sea ice within the Weddell gyre at times of year when we wouldn't see sea ice in as high abundance as we would in other areas. So when we look at planning Antarctic trips, if you can go into the Weddell Sea, you usually cannot get anywhere near as far north in the Weddell Sea as you can if you were on the opposite side of the peninsula, kind of heading down. And that's because of the massive buildup of the sea ice. So because they use it so much, they hang around there, and we see a lot more of these crab-eater seals in this Weddell Sea because of all the ice. Social skills. Our crab eaters actually are the most social of, potentially the most social of the Antarctic seal families. They can be seen in populations of like 1,000 hauled out together. And in the other webinar, I spoke about the elephant seals and the Antarctic fur seal. And those ones, they are social. They've got this dominant male. They have a harem that they're controlling. But it's a completely different social structure to our crab eater seals, where they're just kind of more social. They all hang out with each other, and it isn't like one dominant male breeds with everyone. There's breeding kind of all over the place. So some of this helps with just having protection in numbers. So if you've got a whole lot of crab eater seals, then sometimes it's just easier to protect each other. Especially they are a seal that can be targeted from our leopard seals. You've got more eyes to spot the danger. And even on this picture, you can kind of see the seal in the back. He's got some of these scratches all over its body. Right now, it's still debated as to why they have all these scratches. Some researchers will say that the crab-eater seals are known for having so many scars because of all of the interactions that they have with the leopard seals. Others will argue that it's actually the mating between a male and a female crab-eater seal that ends up resulting in all of this kind of scarring, whether it's kind of some territorial displays between the males, or if it is the male and female also just being quite aggressive towards each other. But they are very social. In terms of their reproduction, reaching sexual maturity around 3 years old. And they do actually haul out individually to give birth out on the ice. And what's interesting with our crab-eater seals is that an adult male actually guards a female and her pup for the first few weeks while the female is weaning. Now, that adult male is not necessarily the father of that pup, because that pup is going to be from last year's mating. That male is hanging out with that crab-eater female, waiting for her to be done so that he can then breed. He is not playing a role in the rearing of the pup. He's just there to say, this is my female. When she's ready, I am breeding her. So, kind of a fascinating thing. But yeah, then the pups are weaned, they go off, and they all go do their thing. In terms of their ecosystem impact, of course, if we've got an absolutely massive, the estimated population numbers that I have found, remember the other two seals, we talked about like 200,000, maybe up to 400,000. An estimated global population of crab-eater seals can be between 70 to 75 million individuals. Find different sources, you'll hear different things, but there is just a massive number of these crab-eater seals. Because there is so much of them, of course, they're going to have a direct impact on the krill predation. They're consuming so much krill, they help to control krill populations, nutrient cycling, what goes in must come out. So things that all of this kind of nutrient cycling that happens throughout the food web. I already mentioned that the crab-eater seals, they can be a prey food source for things like our leopard seals, things like orcas as well. And because they're a seal that's so reliant on the ice, they can also be an indicator of the health of the sea ice. The last photo tip I think I have here is for capturing some different textures. The other thing that if you're not familiar with it, the ice has so many textures. Maybe you've noticed it in some of the photos before. And so I think it's really cool. Have some contrasting textures, the colors and the smoothness perhaps of a seal. And then you've got like all this texture and color and whatnot of the ice behind them. So yeah, look for your textures. I'm almost done. I know we're running out of time for questions. Sorry, I rambled way too much about seals. I just want to quickly chat about the not have trips. So there's a couple of different options. There's this expedition yacht that you can go down on, 12 passengers. We also have a motor sailing yacht, 7 passengers. Either of them is a great opportunity. Come down to Antarctica and explore the peninsula. And when you're on board either one of these kind of yachts, what we would be doing in a day, some of it is Zodiac cruising. So hop in the Zodiacs, come out, and it could be exploring, just hanging out in the icebergs because there's so many amazing icebergs there. looking for seals, looking for whales, looking for anything that we possibly can. A good tip here is preparing for your gear, making sure things are waterproof. I always have like a dry sack bag that it sits in, because even if it's a nice calm day, it's not raining. One, the weather might change at any given moment. Two, sometimes splashing from the waves can get in, so always making sure you've got weatherproofing gear, using lens hoods so that if it is snowing, it's not coming and covering your lens. Yeah, lots of things that you can do to help prepare to have your gear when you're out there. So but yeah, zodiac cruising, again, looking for icebergs, looking for whales. There is a lot of opportunity when you go out in our zodiac cruising. But we also do landing sites as well. And because we're such small groups, it kind of opens up the landing sites. We have so much mobility to move around to different areas. There's a lot of designated landing sites. So, the expedition leader, along with the whole crew, they really work together to make sure that they're planning to have as much diversity in the trip. We're hitting up, hopefully seeing different types of penguins when we're down there, trying for different areas where, a certain seal is more abundant or really good whale watching opportunities. But we'll get on land, walk around, hang out in these penguin colonies, and just get to really enjoy Antarctica. So if you haven't had an opportunity to go, it's a pretty incredible place, and I would recommend. And with that, I'll finish, and we've still got a little bit of time. Sorry, Rob, for some questions. So I'll hand it back over to you if you want to shoot some questions my way.
All right, thank you, Leanne. All right, now before we dive into the question and answer session, I would like to remind everyone that if you do have questions, you can submit them via the question field in your control panel. Just go to the upper right-hand corner and click on those three lines. That's called the hamburger. The menu will drop down. Go ahead and click on questions and submit them there. So let's dive into some of these questions. So you mentioned all of these different types of seals. So now, are they part of the same species? Can they interact, mate together? Can you explain a little bit about that for us?
Yeah, so when we look at seals, you might have heard the word pinniped. So pinniped is the classification that we would use to describe all seals. And within pinniped, we then have walruses. So a walrus would be a pinniped. We have our eared seals, and then we have our true seals. So kind of three different orders, I think it is. Sorry, I can't remember exactly where it is, but three different classifications. And then within each of those three, they'll come down to different species. So our leopard seal, our Weddell seal, and our crabeater seal today that we spoke about are all true seals. Something like our Antarctic fur seal, that would be an eared seal because it does actually have like an external ear flap. There's many different differences between them. I spoke about that in the webinar that I did on Antarctic seals, kind of part 1 in April. So if you want to dive further into that, it's kind of on there. But the seals aren't mating with each other. So a leopard seal and a Weddell seal aren't getting together and mating. They are specific species, and they will only mate within their species. So hopefully that helped.
Great. Thank you for clarifying that for us. So is the krill population around Antarctica plentiful, or is it is global warming and shipping, are they affecting how much krill there are available?
Yeah, I mean, the biomass of krill is absolutely enormous of this Antarctic krill. So there is just a massive amount of them. And obviously, this massive amount can support the ecosystem, but it is when we put people down there that it really kind of messes with the system, because there is fisheries that happen down there. There's krill harvesting that happens down there. And where do you think those krill harvesting operations are going to be? They're going to be in the spots where there is high concentration of krill, and where there is high concentration of krill, the animals also know that. And so they're often in areas where there is an abundance of whales that are often feeding there too. So yeah, it is causing a problem. So having people be a little bit more aware of how krill is prevalent in your own life. Honestly, I probably need a refresh on some of the ways that it's relevant, but in some of the foods or the products that we buy, animal pet food, it's in a whole lot of things that we use. So all of this krill harvesting, if we can kind of reduce the demand of krill harvesting, it will be better for the ecosystem down there. Not only in terms of just making sure that there's still food available for the wildlife, but the impact that having this infrastructure of people in and around sea ice and the emissions that come and the pollutants that are put into the water as a result. So the fisheries, they definitely impact it. As of right now, it's still got an abundance there. We're still seeing populations of seals and of whales recover after the huge sealing and whaling era. And so it does tell us that there is an abundance of food, but we will eventually kind of reach this tipping point of people harvesting way too much, not leaving some for the animals. And then if we add in the sea ice ecosystem too, right at the beginning, we talked about how important and essential the sea ice is in maintaining a krill population. So in years where there is less sea ice formed in the wintertime, you can see it directly reflected in the krill population. We have less krill when we have less sea ice. So if those trends continue as well, then it's going to impact on the krill that's available for humans, but more importantly for the wildlife that lives there.
Great. Thank you, Leanne. So, what time of year is it best for me to come down to visit Antarctica? I'm sure there is a specific time.
I mean, there isn't really a specific time. People love asking this question. What time is the best time to come? And it's true with most itineraries. People always ask, well, what time is the best? What's the best month to go? But it can depend on what you're after. We operate our trips, I believe, in both December and January. And this is a really great time of year because, the penguins have just hatched. And so you can see some of the young baby penguins. Our whales are kind of moving down. A bit later on is towards where we can see kind of more an increase in the number of whales being present as well. If whales are important for you, then going towards the end of the season, but then towards the end of the season, it can be the chicks, the penguin chicks aren't so cute and fluffy. They're still cute, don't get me wrong, but every single time of the year sort of offers different things. So it's not really like this is the best time of year to go. It's if you really want to see penguin chicks, then going in December is probably better. If you're wanting to really capitalize on seeing whales, probably going towards the end of the season is better. So yeah, it depends on what you're after, but any time in Antarctica is amazing.
It does seem that way. So, how typical is it to have calm seas and that beautiful lavender sky that you saw?
Yeah, depends on how lucky you are with weather, I suppose. I mean, I've done trips where the weather is quite brutal, and you get fog, and sometimes it's hard to see around, and it can be there's a lot of precipitation, whether it's rain or if it's wet snow. But then, like later that afternoon, you can have really sunny, sunshiny days. So both types of weather are common. It is almost a guarantee that when you're down there, you are going to experience some level of traverse weather. You're going to have difficult sea conditions. You're going to have rain and wind and everything. And really, what would be the value of going to Antarctica if you didn't get your butt kicked just a little bit by nature down there? You got to go and experience it all. And I definitely think that's kind of a key component of understanding it because being down there and seeing sunshine and beautiful, calm, easy side, like it doesn't give you the proper picture of what life is like in Antarctica. And in order to fully appreciate how tough and resilient these penguins and these seals and these other birds and the whales that are down there, you have to experience the environment. So you will, is all that I can say. I've experienced the extremes on both ends, but just make fun of it. You got to make fun no matter what conditions you got, and bring the good gear down. Have weatherproof gear, bring warm gear. You will need layers. Being out on a Zodiac, even when it's warm and sunshiny, it still does get cold. So having layers is very, very helpful, and having wind/waterproof gear is essential. Lots of hats, lots of gloves, and bring a couple extra things just so that when things get wet, you have alternatives to swap into.
Good advice. Thank you, Leanne. Well, unfortunately, that is going to be the last question that we do have time for today. So I'd like to hand it back to you for your closing comments.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for coming and joining. Hopefully you learned something about our seals, something about Antarctica, and hopefully you will now start to think more about the Antarctic sea ice and that it isn't just related to our seals, but it also relates directly to you in your everyday life. Um, with all of this, we want to make sure that people are doing whatever they can to help protect the environment. And even if the sea ice of Antarctica feels far away, what you do impacts it and impacts the animals that we've talked about today. So go forth and make decisions to help improve our environment and get down to Antarctica. It's such a beautiful place. It's full of magic. And it's just so much fun. So hopefully you'll get a chance to get on down there. But thank you everyone for joining today.
Leanne, we appreciate you taking the time to present for us today. And I'd also like to thank everyone who joined us today. So if you are interested in information on how you could travel to Antarctica with NatHab, please give us a call at 800-543-8917, or you can send us an email at info@nathab.com. Our adventure specialists are happy to help you out. And if you're part of a photo club and would like NatHab to speak to your members about nature and travel photography, email us at webinars@nathab.com. Join us tomorrow for our next daily dose of nature. You can check out this week's lineup, including registration links, on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and we will have the replay available on our website soon. With that, I will conclude the webinar. Goodbye, everybody. We'll see you next time.